Today's COVID update is brought to you by Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price but stay for the service.
And we're back and moving into our first conversation for this morning. As we mentioned, we are discussing the curriculum reform process. In other words, what our children are learning in school and what they need to be learning in school. We have with us Dr. Zabaneh, who is the Minister of State in Education, Culture, Science, and Technology, and you have been taking the lead on this process. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning to both of you. Thanks for having me, and allow me a couple seconds to first wish you all happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you.
To also wish my wife and kids who are watching at home, and of course all of our viewers, and in particular the viewers of the Dangriga division.
Yes.
Happy Valentine's Day, a pleasure to be here.
And we are happy to have you as well talking about this process. It's been ongoing for a while, and so it's a good time to find out how things have been going. Let me just, before we talk about the reform process, just a bit of your background. You have been working in education for a really long time. So let's talk about how the experience you had kind of fed into pushing the curriculum reform.
Well, thanks. I'm glad there's a day now that I'm described as being in education for a really long time. So that's a compliment. Thank you very much. I've had the privilege to serve as chairman for the University of Belize. That was between 2005 and 2008. And then I also served as president at Galen University from 2010 to 2014. But since I returned home from graduate studies, I have tried every year to do some sort of lecturing or facilitating courses and interacting with students, and many of them are teachers who are studying in the various institutions. So I've had quite a long number of years of interaction and learning about how the education system works, and hearing ideas of how we can reform, how we can revolutionize our education system. And so now we have this opportunity, this special privilege to work with many stakeholders to be able to finally try to bring some of these things to bear.
Now, when you talk about curriculum reform, the first question I asked you when you came in what is the last time that there was a comprehensive review of what our children are supposed to learn in the classroom?
Right, so there hasn't been a full comprehensive review. It's been patchwork, if I may use that term. Just additions and insertions and modifications along the way. And the teachers have expressed frustration by this process, because they said, only 2 years ago, right before COVID, you asked us to make this modification, and a few years before that, another modification. And in fact, that process is what led to what we call curriculum overload. So that was the first thing that we addressed, is to look at the very excessive number of learning outcomes. So as you know, each subject has a certain number of learning outcomes that teachers are to be able to deliver to their children. And when we examined it, it was really truly excessive. So it proved the point that a lot of the frustration we see being experienced by students, by teachers, by parents, leading to stagnant or declining performance of students is in great part due to this problem of wanting our children to do far more than they can actually do, wanting our teachers to deliver far more than they can deliver. And so this patchwork has been one of the reasons we have had, in my view. And I think from discussing with teachers and principals and stakeholders, it is something that everybody has been saying, right?
Yeah.
You see your kids going to school with, they no longer can handle the backpack, so they have to have their parents buy the carry-on, right?
Yeah.
With wheels.
I think I still have back pain from high school and primary
Absolutely.
school.
So these things we can observe and we can say, but something doesn't seem right. right? And we fortunately, we call these low-lying fruits.
Yeah.
We've been able to address that relatively quickly and easily by reducing the number of learning outcomes and reducing the number of subjects. So learning outcomes we've reduced across the board by between 40 and 60%. And then in terms of subjects, we've reduced those by about 20 to 25%, so about 2 or 3 subjects, both at the primary and secondary level. In this latter case, we have done that only for some pilot schools
Okay.
to observe it, and we're now evaluating that intervention, right?
Now, I want to jump in right there because we all say we're open to the idea of change and then the rollout takes place and we get a bit scared. What subjects in the pilot schools have been removed?
So we have had a lot of additional stuff that we talked about, right? And what the approach we have taken is to look at what it is we need to keep. So if you go back in history, about 20, 30 years ago, primary schools would normally have 7 to 8 subjects. Secondary schools, maybe 8 to 9 subjects. And right pre-COVID, we've observed that we've had primary schools, some primary schools doing 12, 13 subjects, and high schools as well. So we've kept what we all agree are the basics. We've kept language and communication, right? So that's where we do things like teaching the child and observing how they learn to write. They're able to read, they're able to comprehend what they're reading, they're able to communicate based on what they're learning. Then arithmetic and math, so the quantitative stuff, right? Starting base from preschool with just using their little blocks to learn how to count, all the way up arithmetic, which is multiplication, division, etc., moving forward into higher order math, algebra, etc. at high school. That's the second one. The third one, social studies, right? Students need to develop an identity, who they are, what our nation is all about, how people relate with each other in society, etc. So that's social studies. Included in there is history as well. And then science, right? So we all agree that these are foundational courses that we all need. Then now we are looking at the evidence around the world of areas that have been neglected. We're looking at the arts, right? Because we know that we have the left brain and right brain, right? The creative, the cognitive, and many times we don't develop that left brain that deals with creativity, that deals with the right brain that deals with seeing things from a large perspective that you develop, you know, when you do music, when you do art, when you do dancing, performance, and so forth. So that's now going to be a regular subject, not something that you do maybe
Once
just on
week.
Thursdays or whatever, right? That's the fifth one. The sixth one is sports or wellness, if you will. Wellness. So some schools may have programs that might be, say, football or some basketball and so on, but more in an organized way, so that if you're going to do football, it's not recess where you're just going to kick a ball to each other. You will learn certain techniques. You will learn discipline. You will
So
learn
you'll
how,
have learning outcomes
right,
for those as
precisely.
well.
So,
Okay.
right? So that's the sixth one. Then the denominational schools will obviously have religion, right? That's what defines them. So that would be like the seventh course, right? And then the eighth course would be a course that the school has latitude to decide upon, right? So if you are in a rural community and you want to do an agricultural-based type, vocational type course for your kids, along the lines of what we might have done, say, with REAP in the past, or you're on the island and you want to do tourism, or you want to do a blend, whatever it is, schools will have some flexibility to determine that last course. So all the other courses that have been added on are no longer going to be, they will be integrated into the different subjects.
Yeah.
Right?
I was trying to think of classes that may have been eliminated. There are things like health and family life education, I know that was integrated a few years back. What's the plan with that?
So right, so integration is going to be key. In the sciences and in social studies, a lot of this material will be brought in because, in fact, what was done was to take a certain idea out of social studies, family life, which might have been done in, say, 3 or 4 weeks, and then make that a full-blown course. And so these are the things that now will be integrated back in a seamless way. Maybe this is a good place to add something exciting that, in our view, is going to be a part of the revolution of the curriculum. These are called cross-curricular learning areas. So you will have, for example, communication, and then this brings in the other area of assessment. Communication is normally assessed in the language course, right? But we're going to be switching now from content-based focus where children go and memorize to a competency-based approach where you now will be looking at what children can do, how they apply the knowledge. So it's not just the knowledge itself, but the skills that you need to exhibit based on that knowledge, the attitudes that you are supposed to develop to be able to contribute to society and all that. And so these cross-curricular learning outcomes are critical. You will not only be assessing communication in language, but let us say in math, you have a new approach to teach math, which would be problem-based learning, you call it, or project-based learning.
Yeah.
So you have the kids do a project that is based on the math that they're learning. But then you will ask them to go in front of the classroom
And do a
presentation. So that's where communication
So
comes
it's building in
So
the,
you
reinforcing the other lessons as
Correct.
well.
And so teachers will no longer have these blinders on, but they need to communicate with each other
Yeah.
and be able to develop these cross-curricular areas as well.
What's interesting is, you know, as we progress with technology, we can all acknowledge simple changes that have taken place over time. You know, at one point people learned shorthand, then they learned typewriter, then they learned to use a typewriter, I'm sorry, then they learned computer skills. What I'm not hearing is the evolution of the technology today. What about things like coding, which in schools in some of the more developed countries are implemented at a very young age, because it will be the language of the future for our little ones.
Right. So again, integration. In the sciences now, that's where we're reviewing all the material that we've been delivering over the years. We are modernizing all the courses. So in the sciences, we have coding, we have artificial intelligence, we have robotics, we have all of those topics now that are what children should be learning and exhibiting some sort of skills based on that learning. So going back to this huge revolution from content to competency and capability. So in science, because the teachers were so stressed out to deliver so much in such a short time, they barely had any time to create little projects for their kids, right? But now, with the removal of all of this excess stuff, a lot of it, by the way, which were misplaced. So you would have certain topics in Standard 5 that you would probably not need until second form in math and that sort of thing. And so you have science now with these new modern topics to be covered, but these are also more amenable to project-based teaching, to project-based learning. So if you're teaching artificial intelligence or robotics, you have certain things nowadays you see some of the more progressive schools having their children compete and all that stuff in robotics competition and all that. That's competency. You're able then to judge how well they're able to put certain concepts together and use pieces of machine equipment and form a little robot that can pick up something and all that. Then you're able to assess the competence of how, not just that they know about robotics, but that they also have exhibited the skills to make something into a robot. That's a huge jump. And so parallel to all of this, on the curriculum itself, we are also focusing on revolutionizing the teacher training programs. Because imagine this now, all our teachers now will have to be retrained. It's a new mindset. Unfortunately for the teachers, while there's some anticipation, anxiety at the beginning, they see now that this is really what they have wanted to do themselves. They want to see their kids able to do something, not just regurgitate something, right? And that's a big key feature of this reform.
So what does this mean for standardized testing like PSE? Because let's be honest, when a child hits standard 5, and especially in standard 6, they don't learn anymore. They learn to memorize for the PSE, so they and their schools can look good.
Correct, absolutely. That's where we see one of the greatest weakness of the system we've had. We are training our kids to become great test takers. They become great at PSE or at CXC, but that's not what they'll do in the real world.
Or feel like a failure because they have so much anxiety with testing.
Absolutely right. So PSE is what is called a summative test, a summative assessment. And that's fine. You need certain tests like that. But that's just one tool in the assessment kit. So we have diagnostic tests. So diagnostic tests are there to tell us, okay, where are the primary schools, infant 2 level? What are the standard 4 level? So you give diagnostic tests. For example, coming back from opening schools and the effect of the pandemic, we're doing diagnostic tests so that teachers know where the students are, what are the gaps, what it is that is missing at a certain level. Then you have the summative type of assessments, which is like PSE, these standardized tests. And then where we have not been focusing is on formative testing. That's the kind of testing that is supposed to be informing the teachers, not the students, so that the teachers can improve on their teaching, right? Formative assessment. So it's like, I was thinking that an analogy is the citrus or the cane farmer. You know that nowadays, people are talking to their plants so that they grow and all that. But you imagine a case where the farmer is doing certain horticultural practices to get productivity from their citrus tree. They do the assessment, they see the tree is not bearing, and then they start shouting at the tree. It's not about the tree, it's about the farmer who needs to assess what they are doing to determine what needs to be adjusted so that the tree can be productive. And this is what has not been done enough in the past. And so moving from a content base to a competency base now will require that our teachers also learn how to properly assess formatively, summatively, diagnostically, and use that in a holistic way to be able to do the right things in the classroom.
When it comes to the overhaul of the curriculum, was there a need for modifications based on demographic and perhaps community, or is it a blanket when it comes to learning outcomes?
Yeah, so a whole area of modern revolutionizing of curricula, because that's what most countries are going through who are doing it, is that we have to be culturally sensitive in what we do. A part of what happens is in the traditional factory style, production style curriculum that we've had in the past, we take each student as being the same, when every student is different. In fact, there's a whole area of research now where we're learning about personalized learning, personalized teaching to the student, not that the teacher should be the center of the classroom, but that it's focused on the students. And so a student that comes from a particular background may see things differently, may have issues with English as a second language. All of those things now must be incorporated into the new way of teaching, right? That's very, very important.
Well, that was the question I had about piloting, because there was a pilot before about teaching English as a second language in some communities where English isn't the first language. I don't know if it's ever been rolled out to the rest of the country, but that's what happens sometimes when you pilot something. It just stays in the areas where you've started. Let's talk timeline here. So you're piloting at this moment. When is the expected rollout of the new revised curriculum for children?
Okay, so we have three phases that we're working with. The first phase is what we've done with the overload. Yes. So we had consultations from January of last year to about August. The second phase, which we're in now, is being led by a professional steering committee. Okay, we have professionals from across the country in this, and I want to thank them very much. They have been contributing significantly. If we have time, I'd be happy to acknowledge them. And that phase is looking at developing what is called a curriculum framework. So it would be a document, not very long, that will guide the actual people writing the various syllabi. So the syllabi for math at different levels and so forth. They would look at this framework and say, okay, the vision of our country is stated clearly in this framework, and so whatever I am doing needs to be aligned with the vision that we have for our country. These are the kinds of assessments that we need to be doing, and so forth. So that framework is something we've never done before, have a nationally developed framework that everybody can be guided, north, south, east, and west. Here is what we're all doing together, so that we don't have this variation in quality and standards all over the place. The final phase will be where we have sub-working groups that are looking at the particular subjects now and developing each of the syllabi for each of the courses. And one of the great things we've gotten back feedback from teachers is that they've said, listen, we spend an inordinate amount of time at night preparing our units, right? And why don't we have standardized units that we all create together, and we have, say, a website, and you can go there and pick up your course for social studies at whatever level. And then you make your tweaks based on what you need to do, but you can then spend that time to think about your particular students, personalizing what you need to do for them, right? So we're aiming then that by 2023, 2024, we have all come onto the same page as to what it is we will implement, and we implement fully 2023, 2024. Right now, we're piloting the first phase, and then in this new academic year, we will pilot based on the framework. So going into details now into the actual subjects syllabi. So that's kind of the timeline we're looking at.
How is class sizes being factored into the conversation? That's one of the issues, as I understand it.
Yes, and some of these things are going to be hard to change, right? Because imagine you are in a village, you don't have a lot of students in the catchment area, but yet, so you might have lower class sizes.
Your
you might
joint
have
classes.
10, 12, and you might have multi-grade setting. Now we know there are some significant disadvantages with having multi-grades, because one teacher has to be, you have a whole bunch of all of them together in the same class. Yeah. So that's very difficult to deal with. That has to be linked with resources, right? So when we were looking at when we had the discussion on reducing the number of subjects, we had anxiety again from teachers to say, okay, well, I'll be teaching this course that will no longer be required. What happens to me? Am I going to be fired or whatever? Yeah. So we said, well, let's discuss that. What ideas do we have? So we came to a very important matter, which is that we don't have counselors, that we need counselors in schools, right? And
especially primary level.
So we've come up with the plan that many of these teachers will have opportunities to get retrained in counseling, or retrained in other areas. If they're poor, doing not so well in math or another subject, that teacher can go and assist the main teacher of the class. Or in multi-grade schools that need more teachers, they can be redeployed. So it's for us to be creative. It's for us to get ideas from the teachers themselves on how to solve these problems. And I'm happy to report to you that the teachers are the ones who have the very best ideas on what we need to do. and we're trying to implement those ideas, right?
Dr. Zabaneh, what's the plan on how you get teachers across this country back into training to relearn or unlearn their previous methods of teaching for what you expect to be project-based teaching?
Well, the first thing is communication.
Yeah.
Meeting them, we've started our first round. This is just the first round of face-to-face discussion with our teachers. We just had one on Friday in Toledo. This Friday, every Friday for the next 7 weeks now, we're going to be meeting with teachers around the country. Next one will be Corozal and moving around, sitting with them. And I will tell you that even when we were doing the consultations before on overload, we did that virtually. Teachers, you could see that there was a sigh of relief that there are certain things that they have been agitating for so long that are finally going to be implemented. You also find that it's not just the teachers, but even within the Ministry of Education. We have great professionals in the Ministry of Education, and now they're saying, we have been agitating for this, we have been agitating for that, and now we're happy that we get this opportunity to be able to roll out certain things that have just been shelved. Like, for example, you made the point that there was consultations for English as a second language. Many of these things, thousands and thousands of dollars spent, and then when we reach the point of writing the report, it sits on a shelf. So no monitoring, no evaluation,
No follow through.
even if there is implementation. So that suggests to me that the teachers are, once they understand what we're doing, that it's not just a patchwork, that this is really putting things right side up, the way that they have been agitating for so long, that they will be the first ones to go forward and make sure that they do what they need to do.
How do you bring in the other partner in education? Because they're going to be the most critical. That's parents who grew up learning in a particular way, covering certain subjects, that will then see what their children are doing in school and may very well have many complaints or concerns. How do you get them involved at this phase?
Well, yes, parents are obviously a critical stakeholder, and we have in consultations met with parents as well. We've met, in fact, the first set of consultations were we had 18 different consultations, including the opposition party as well. Because one question that comes up is, well, we're doing this, if the government changes, what happens?
Yeah.
Well, it has to be that we're all doing this together, and that we can't, that's become sacred, and we can't touch that going forward again, unless it is to improve it, not to destroy it. And so parents have to play a critical role in that. From and I will admit, the limited consultation so far with parents, we've had some.
Well, we don't have parent organizations with schools, not so many.
They're not as organized as they should be. So parents will have to play a more important role. But if we think of ourselves who already have children now and who were in the previous, when I call that, the pre-patch curriculum, where we had 7, 8 subjects and so on, you'd find that many times your teachers were able to spend more time with you because they were not overloaded. And so parents, I believe, from those that I have discussed this matter with, are also showing some relief that, well, we're finally not going to have to do the homework for our children. Right? I always give this little story, which is real. My wife came back from dropping off the kids at school, and she was telling me that after the kids went in, the parents were standing outside, and they were talking to each other and comparing the grades that the parents got on a project. Because the parents stay up late at night to do these elaborate projects that are way beyond what the children can do themselves. So I think removing all of that, we are promoting that for homework, that at the primary level, as you go forward, the homework will increase, but you shouldn't be having more than half an hour to an hour of homework for a child, because the learning ought to occur in the classroom, If it's homework, it's for them to reflect upon what they learned in school so that they could rethink the whole ideas and so on, but it's not for them to take on a part of the curriculum at home.
Yeah.
Right? That is through the window now.
And it's only
Making
built
it
the
rational.
divide. It's built a deep divide between parents who have the knowledge or the time to sit and help with their children versus
Absolutely.
children who've had to fend for themselves.
For sure, for sure. The pandemic has shown us that there's a massive gap, right?
Yeah.
And here's another thing, that we are happy for the kids who go to the elite schools. They go there and they're the ones that get the awards and so forth. But if you look at it closely, the majority of those kids have parents who are doing well financially, who themselves went to sixth form and college, and their parents have been able to sit with them. Maybe they have a setting in the family where one parent is able to be at home, the other one is out working. That parent spends time with them. But the majority of our kids don't have that privilege. They come from homes where they don't have, maybe none of the parents are there. And so there's a massive gap that has been exposed, especially with COVID, because these are the kids, the majority, who are way behind, who have lost so much learning because of what the pandemic has done to us.
Yeah.
So this is a critical point, right?
While this is, of course, a crucial overhaul, allow me just to divert this a bit to ask. There is also the need for infrastructural development in some schools. We've seen the images. How is the government, the ministry, working hand in hand with these schools to ensure that not only do we have a sound curriculum, we also have a safe space for students to learn? A lot of the deterioration in some of these buildings caused by neglect somewhat over the past 2 years.
Right. So you might have heard about our project on the south side of Belize City, right? And I know many people don't like that term, but geographically, that's where the high schools are. And so that's where we're beginning to roll out our full free education up to the end of high school.
Yeah.
And in those four high schools, they are also part of our pilot for the high schools. We are certainly looking at what they need. And it turns out that many of these schools in the impoverished areas are the ones you're talking about. And that's where we need to start. We need to start from those places that are farthest behind and bring them up as far as we can going forward. So it is to prioritize our resources so that we can get these things done. Let me give you a very simple example. Kabe was here 2 or 3 weeks ago. They spent a whole week with us. There was a project that they had sent to us offering free scholarships for kids to go to high school. That was shelved. We brought that out, and now these scholarships will be given to the same 4 schools on the geographic south side of Belize City. So there are partnerships, there are people who want to assist, who knock on the door, and we in the past have been occupied with other things, and we have to take advantage of those opportunities. We have to prioritize our attention to the things that are most needed for our children, right?
I mean, we're running out of time so quickly, but I do have one question that keeps nagging at me. Is a rollout in 2023 going to take into consideration all the learning loss that has taken place in the past 2 years?
It will be a catch-up process, and it will not be resolved in the next year or so. I think that will take another 3 or 4 years for us to be able to do that. But we now have a better chance of doing it, a better opportunity to do it, because we're not going to be confronted with that wall of an overloaded curriculum. That's the first thing, right? And we will now have teachers who will have 2 pathways. One, we have a teacher learning institute that we had established in August of last year, where we put up virtually various courses. So they will be able to go there to take on some of the new techniques that they will need to have.
Yeah.
But we're also going to be reforming all the teacher training curriculum themselves. So all the schools that are training teachers, those will be changed. And of course, that has that you'll see the impact of that farther down, because those are the new teachers that are coming out trained for the curriculum. So by making these changes, we will have a chance to close that gap in a quicker way, in a faster way, than if we had just come back after the pandemic and just continue with what we had before that was not working. So yes, I think that's a great point. We will just have to keep working as vigorously as we can to try to make up that loss of learning for these kids, right?
So let me ask you to close with this question. My niece turned 5 yesterday, so she's just about to start school. What would be the difference in her trajectory if she continued with the curriculum that exists today versus this new updated curriculum that you're hoping to implement?
Right.
What's the difference for the future?
Well, there'll be then I'll have to ask you, there'll be a couple of questions I'd have to ask. Where would she be attending school? And does her parents have the wherewithal to assist her? If she's attending one of these, what I call elite schools, which by the way, all of our schools should be elite schools,
I agree.
right? But kudos to them, they have done what they needed to do. But if she's attending one of those schools, she has parental assistance and all that, then she would have done well. She could have still had the chance to do well. But even elite schools in the developed countries, because in our research we found that countries in the OECD, which are the richest countries, have recognized the problem of overload, and they are recommending to their schools to reduce the overload as well. So even our elite schools here, we are recommending, look at your curriculum
But they
and
don't
see.
have to roll out the curriculum that you implement.
Well, we are in those discussions,
Okay.
because there are a couple of them who have agreed,
Yeah.
right? That and I think I could state this because one of the members of the steering committee is from St. Catherine's.
Okay.
The principal, Ms. Tillett, she's a member of the committee, and she is fully on board and has already made some amendments to her curriculum towards reducing the overload. So I think that once people start to see the rationale behind it, they make these changes. But if your niece,
Yeah.
if she were in one of the average schools,
Well, there's public and private. She would go to public, yeah.
right, and now meets what we call an optimized curriculum, we've brought it to where it should be. So it's not that we're shortchanging anybody, we're in fact optimizing what we have. That she will have a greater chance that her teacher will be able to spend more time with her, because her teacher is not wasting hours at night trying to do the units. That we're moving from quantity to quality. So we're moving towards teachers looking more in depth at concepts. So we just don't fly over concepts. Teachers will tell you that for years and years, they have this amount of learning outcomes, and they have never been able to deliver it because it's just too much.
Yeah.
So now that we're at a place where it makes sense, they can then spend time to go in depth into concepts with their students, and then identify students who are slower in other areas and faster in other areas, and make the adjustments for them. So I would think that your niece in one of those schools would do far better learn. She will enjoy coming to school. We should see down the road a reduction in dropouts, because a lot of the dropouts is frustration.
Yeah.
Kids come to
They
school.
fall behind.
Yes, and then the assessments are punitive,
Yeah.
right? They're summative, and then it's all about you. Hey, you never make one certain grade.
Yeah.
Rather than the teacher asking, well, why is it that this child is not where everybody else is at, right? And so with these changes, I believe that your niece and other kids will want to come to school and will perform better. But I don't know if I will get a little closing, because I have a
All
little
right, if
something
you
to
can,
say.
because we are out of time.
No,
now,
I
so
want to
yeah.
wish my brother, Doug, who his birthday today.
Oh, that means you have to sing it?
Well, I don't know. What, sing happy birthday?
Yeah.
Oh boy, I need a guitar and some drums. Next time around.
All
But
right.
thanks for having me.
This is only, I mean, this is just rushing through the main points. And we do hope that we can come back and really flesh out some of the substantial changes, because it's a big deal.
Yes.
And we know that a lot of parents watch our show and they want to hear and understand.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right. And with that, we're going to go ahead and take a break.
And when we come back, we'll be talking to Anne Marie Williams, who will be reflecting on the life of Sir Manuel Esquivel. Stay tuned.